You're watching Promethean Actions weekly class for November 1st, 2025 with Brian Lance. As Tony Pappert, I'll be your host. The President Trump's Asia tour just conducted has momentous consequences, both for the international system of states, the international economic system, the international trading system, and also for the U.S., whereas you'll see it's going to massively accelerate the reindustrialization of the United States, which is one of the basic promises of the Trump administration, which he's done incredible amount to further without even before his first year in office. So you'll learn a lot of things which you're not going to hear anyplace else, at least not for weeks or months in the future. And with that, let me hand it over to Brian.
Okay, Tony, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So yes, the Asian summits, President Trump and his team and their travels through Asia, that's just the beginning. And Treasury Secretary Bessent summed it up: when the U.S. leads, the world follows. And leading involves asserting the American system of political economy. And it's laying the basis for a new Bretton Woods, as we've discussed on many occasions, including last Saturday with Will Wirtz. What we're doing here, and it'll become clearer and clearer, is that we're actually taking control of our own destiny. We're reshaping our industries, our supply chains. We're improving our culture and schools. We're creating hundreds of thousands of jobs just out of what's been put together in the course of the lead up and then the completion of this Asia tour. So this is much more than tariff negotiations or shopping lists or small change stuff. This is and I really urge listeners, viewers to park their cynicism at the door, encourage their neighbor in particular to do that, because we're really about a certain kind of, I would say, reintegration. Besson used the term integration. I think reintegration in a certain sense, particularly when you're talking about the U.S., Japan, and South Korea, which is what I'm going to focus on. Of course, Malaysia was involved, Thailand, and so forth, Vietnam. But I'm focusing on South Korea and Japan tonight. And first of all, I want to make clear, these are complex negotiations. This was not something, this was not a rabbit pulled out of a hat. Project timelines, the lining up of the companies, having a consensus in Japan or South Korea and its chaebols, its large corporations, on the same page, moving ahead. And I want to mention another critical element, which is U.S. capital. And what is transpiring here, it's approximating $1 trillion of investment coming from Japan and South Korea as organized by the governments. There's other investments going on, Toyota and so forth, but as organized as part of the tariff negotiations, South Korea and Japan are ponying up $900 billion in investments into the United States. And of course, they and their companies and so forth are intent on ensuring that those investments are pay off, that they bear fruit. But first, in terms of U.S. capital, this will also be This will also play a very important role, the Asian agreements, as that unfolds, in promoting and encouraging a flow of U.S. capital out of money market funds, out of the Fed, and back into the real physical economy of the United States. An example of that is J.P. Morgan Chase. This was on October 12th, and believe me, the negotiations in around South Korea and Japan were well underway. They've been underway since before the beginning of the year. Uh, but on October 12th, J.P. Morgan, reflecting, the shifting winds, announced a $1.5 billion initiative to finance and invest in industries critical to U.S. national security and economic resilience. That's from their press release. Areas singled out are supply chain and advanced manufacturing, defense and aerospace, energy independence, frontier and strategic technologies. You get the idea. But this coming from J.P. Morgan Chase, I think it's a sign of the times. The trip or trips, because there are many trips involved in this and pulling this together. First of all, there's rare earths, the 17 metallic elements, hard to mine, therefore called rare. This has been a strategic vulnerability for the United States, as rare earths are critical to small but powerful magnets and utilized in all sorts of uh, applications. They're used in phosphors, for screens like your phone or computer, and they're also used as catalysts in chemical processes. So these have become very, very important, and we don't process them. We barely mine them. This is one of these things that was outsourced from the beginning. We hardly got started in rare earths, and we just started buying them from abroad, and primarily from China, that now controls some 90% of the processing of rare earths. Well, that's been reversed as a result of the negotiations starting in Australia and Malaysia, Japan, Thailand, Cambodia. What's been secured essentially is a combination of investments, including U.S. investments in the case in Australia, to mine and process an expanded quantity of rare earths, not only abroad, but this is side by side with the Trump administration's commitment to move rapidly now to invest, develop both mining and processing of rare earths in the United States. The investment into MP Materials, Linus USA. These are a couple of examples. But what then occurred with the negotiations with China's Hu Lifeng with Besant, first in Malaysia and then in South Korea, was an agreement where essentially China agreed that they'll continue to export rare earths for the next year, 2 years, to the United States and to all of our allies, because we're all in on this together. Um, and from there, we'll pick it up ourselves with our allies, as I've named them, and we'll take care of this business ourselves. So this is the window. This window of vulnerability is being rapidly closed. But that's just the beginning. And I want to emphasize, this is the American system of political economy coming forward. Lutnick will be overseeing this. Commerce Secretary Lutnick will be overseeing this with a committee, probably all largely overlapping with the National Energy Dominance Council that the Trump administration created. But this is being overseen in conjunction with Japan and South Korean companies and with the governments involved. As I said, over $1 trillion of investment. And this is bringing forth a relationship between the United States, South Korea, and Japan based on the American system. And I just want to just mention this in passing. It's important. The Japan's entire post feudal development in the beginning in the middle of the 19th century was the direct result of President Ulysses Grant sending the American economist E. Peshine Smith, the student of Henry Carey, who was Lincoln's economic advisor, to Japan. And the outcome of that included an industrial promotion board, and it included the First National Bank of Japan to oversee a dirigist policy of development of the Japanese economy from the top, in collaboration with a growing array of private entrepreneurs, corporations, and so forth that developed. And after World War II, it was a revival of the American system in Japan, overseen by General MacArthur and others who had been part of the mobilization, the Arsenal of Democracy mobilization of the United States during World War II, that put the Japan miracle back on its feet in Japan after World War II. South Korea, it's a similar story with South Korea. A little bit later, in the post-Korean War period, it was the economic writings of Friedrich List, the German-American economist. His writing, The National System on Political Economy, is probably known to some of you, published in 1841. And it spelled out a national economic policy approach emphasizing state intervention to foster industrial growth and protect, quote unquote, infant industries. And so the export economy of South Korea was not a free market British economy. It was an industrial economy. And so this is what came to dominate South Asia. This outlook. We deserted it. After the assassination of Kennedy, increasingly, we deserted it. And actually beginning with the death of Franklin Roosevelt. But but here now we have a new combination of nations coming together around a revival of the American system outlook, both domestically here in the United States, most importantly, the leadership coming from the Trump administration, from the United States, but together with, importantly, the big players, Japan and South Korea, drawing on their long history. So what's the outcome of this? The results of this, first of all, and this may cause some of you to do some thinking on this. This is really the beginnings of a U.S. capital budget. In other words, as opposed to Congress every year, like NASA, here's how much we're going to give you this year. Come back next year, and or the year after, and we'll tell you what we're going to give you this year. And you never know, up and down the politics, wheeling, dealing, boom busts of the Federal Reserve, and so on. A capital budget is a commitment. It's extending a line of credit and saying, okay, over the next 10 years, you're going to get X amount of money. Like a bank would tell a contractor, okay, here's a line of credit. You don't start paying interest on what this line of credit, except to the extent that you actually draw on this line of credit and utilize it. But this is so you can build this, that, and the other thing over this extended period of time. Well, a national capital budget is required, and we're getting it, ironically, we're getting it from the outside in. We're getting it with Japan and South Korea, importantly, making long-term capital investments that will span at least 10 years, if not longer, depending on these projects, which I'll outline. And there's, just again, to emphasize a different point on this, in addition to, the U.S. capital budget concept and bringing that forward in lines of credit, is that the actual projects involved putting this together was a complex calculus. You're dealing with, mature economies, industrial economies. You're dealing with corporations. You're dealing with politicians that are, they're out to ensure their their political survival. They're um, they're not interested in losing propositions. We should be absolutely clear on this. Nobody involved in this is interested in losing a proposition. For South Korea, their $350 billion commitment in terms of investments, that's almost their entire current um, currency reserves. 300 their total currency reserves is about 450 billion. This is 350 billion. 350 billion is not small change. It's not chump change to these countries. Japan, their commitment of $550 billion, that's not small either. That's half of Japan's entire currency reserves. That's to give you a sense, I hope, of the order of significance of these investments. It's not like they've got a bag of cash sitting somewhere and they just dole it out. That's not the world. That's not the real world. These countries are making massive commitments. They're not going to be made all at once. South Korea's, I believe the negotiations are basically at this point to largely ensure that South Korea makes investments of approximately 20 billion a year. So you're talking about that being spread out, over a decade. And there'll be other areas where they'll make more investments up front and so forth. This is all in the process of being negotiated, has been, will be, and will be fine-tuned. This is an ongoing process. It's an investment into the U.S. economy, creating hundreds of thousands of productive, high-wage, upskilled jobs. The companies involved: Hitachi, Westinghouse, SoftBank, perhaps the largest construction builder in the United States, Bechtel Corporation, but also other large corporations. This is large scale, and throughout it, the U.S. administration is going to be in control. The investments are being decided by the United States in collaboration with our colleagues in Japan and South Korea. The structure of the funding is a major component of this in terms of how much is in terms of lines of credit, loan guarantees, and so forth, cash, what's equity investments, where, say, a Japanese company makes a equity investment into a U.S. company to finance nuclear power plants by that company. This is all involved. So first on South Korea, briefly, we've talked about South Korea and South Korea's shipbuilding before. So let's just say that as part of this tariff deal with Japan, 350 billion will be invested. It's already in process. 4/5. Well, let me just say that 5 billion for starters. 5 billion is going into the Philly shipyard in Philadelphia, a formerly major U.S. shipyard, right there in the heart of Philadelphia. That's now owned by Hanwha, a conglomerate, a South Korean-based conglomerate. 5 billion is now being invested into that shipyard to upgrade it, and the U.S. government has agreed to allow Hanwha to build a U.S. nuclear submarine there. Before we talked about the first LNG carriers, massive LNG carriers, first one and then another, are being built at the Philly shipyard. Those are the first LNG carriers being built here in decades and decades. But now a U.S. nuclear submarine will be built in the Hanwha shipyards. HD Hyundai and Cerberus Capital Management. Cerberus now owns the Gila Subic shipyard in the Philippines. They're going to be investing $5 billion in additional shipyard capacity and supply chains. The Republic of Korea will import 3.3 million tons of LNG a year. Uranium enrichment is being invested in, generating 3,000 jobs. That's in Pinkerton, Ohio. We've talked about that before. Amazon, in part of this back and forth, is investing $5 billion into the Republic of Korea, that's South Korea, into their cloud infrastructure. So this is the scale in terms of South Korea. There's military components to this, purchase of military equipment from the United States, aircraft, and so on and so forth. That's additional elements. Turning quickly to Japan, that $550 billion includes $332 billion equivalent in real resources, human and natural resources, industrial capacity, into critical energy infrastructure. This includes, I'm rushing ahead here, but if you could go to the third slide, Tony. This is the cover of the fact sheet. This is available. You can get this online. You can read it yourself. We're just going to move ahead here. The first slide is Trump and company in South Korea. But here is the fact sheet from the White House. President Donald Trump drives forward billions of investment from Japan. You can get it. It's like 7-8 pages. It runs through the highlights of the agreement between the U.S. and Japan. There were prior agreements signed in September, earlier agreements signed in July. This had been in process of ongoing negotiation. But a critical first element in this thing is Westinghouse. Japan is going to invest on the order, and you get different figures, but it's $80 to $100 billion in building a fleet of nuclear reactors with Westinghouse Electric in the United States. This would be 6 to 8 nuclear reactors. It may also include small modular reactors. Westinghouse has a 300 megawatt SMR as well. But this is an AP 1000 deal largely. The heavy industrial companies of Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, Toshiba Group, and IHI will be major suppliers for the Westinghouse reactors. And I want to underscore how important this is. For the last 2 years, I've emphasized again and again, including on these classes, the fact that we have with the AP 1000, the leading Generation 3 plus nuclear reactor in the world. And here you see it in this slide being built in China. 6 are now built or being built, more being added beyond that. I think the number goes up to 10. But this is you see there in the background, the third one there in the row going back. That will be the 4th reactor that are in Haiyang, which is in Shandong province, AP 1000 reactors. All right. That's all on one site. There's another site as well where Westinghouse is overseeing the construction of these AP 1000s in China. So as Treasury Secretary Bessent admits, we're behind China on nuclear energy and we're going to catch up. And that's what we're doing. We're going to build. And if anybody's got questions about this, again, FOAK versus NOAK, first of a kind, the Volpol nuclear power plants 3 and 4 down there in Georgia. Sure, they cost a lot. We hadn't built nuclear power plants in 30, 40 years. Nobody knew how to build them anymore, frankly. So we had to learn. Okay. So now you move forward. That's what the Chinese have done. They're building these things, throwing them up. Hasn't talked about it as being like almost one a week, but it's not that rapidly. But the point is, you get the point. Um, and so as you move to nth of a kind, reproducing these modular reactors, components can be produced in factories. You can group these reactors together, 3, 4, 5 reactors in the same site, like down there in Georgia, which has 4 reactors now, and reduce the costs, and share a single footprint. So this has long been needed, and now it's being done. Uh, we'll come back to some other details on this. But additionally, you go to the next slide, if you will. Their GE Vernova, together with Hitachi, is going forward with the BWRX 300. This is a small modular reactor. It's still water cooled. It's a boiling water reactor. Um, and they're going to build these with an investment somewhere in the range, again, of $80 to $100 billion. We'll see what actually shakes out in the details. I don't want to go by what the Financial Times or the Wall Street Journal or whatever says. More details will be forthcoming. But this is $322 billion being invested in these areas, but it's also being invested in areas like gas turbines, $25 billion. Gas turbines, steam turbines. Steam turbines are what are used today for nuclear reactors. Generators, stabilization systems in partnership with GE Vernova, our largest turbine producer. 25 billion into electrical power modules, transformers, substations, copper smelting and refining facilities. All of this is part, and think about it. Where's the steel going to come from for this? Well, you may remember in June of this year, steel workers and President Trump were celebrating there on the outskirts of Pittsburgh the Nippon-U.S. Steel Partnership to expand U.S. steel production. You might have wondered, at least your neighbor probably wondered, well, who is going to buy this steel? I mean, we import 25% of the steel we use already. Well, now you're getting the answer to that question. This is the kind of investments that are going to use that U.S. Produced steel from Nippon, U.S. Steel, from Cleveland Cliffs, and so forth. So this is building off of pieces that have already been put in place. And then just one more to mention, Intra One. Intra One is kind of a new player. The family's Turkish, the Habush family. But their company, Intra One, based out of London and Houston, but primarily out of London at this point. Their son, Wadi, is a U.S. attorney. He's heading it up. They've reached an agreement with the Tennessee Valley Authority to bring new scale in on the level of 6 gigawatts of potential power, 6 major plants, multiple reactors in each plant, and so on and so forth. So, or up to 6 plants, but so 4 to 6 plants. So 6 gigawatts of power total is potentially there. Intra One is another firm that is receiving a significant investment from Japan. Now, I want to throw a little curveball. You can move to the next slide. This is the BWRX 300. What it looks like. It's largely buried underground, the reactor itself. So move on to the next slide there, if you will. Yeah. Now this may be a curveball for you. In the middle of the Japanese U.S. deal, the fact sheet from the White House, it spells out specifically $500 million, quote, to build a high pressure, high temperature diamond grit manufacturing facility. Okay. That's what you see here, or you see a single unit from what would be part of that manufacturing facility. This is the production of industrial diamonds under incredible pressures and temperatures. Um, uh, you can count on one hand the number of plants that are involved in this in one form or another in the United States, including recycling. Um, you're putting, as you see on the right hand side, this is the pressure is 50,000 to 60,000 atmospheres. The temperature is 1,500 degrees centigrade. So the Japanese are going to be collaborating and building an entirely new high pressure, high temperature diamond grit manufacturing facility. These industrial diamonds are crushed. This is used to produce grit, which, is uh, with adhesive made part of machine tooling. It's used in drill bits to go through abrasive rock in natural gas and oil mining, etc. Incredibly important, and 80% of our imports for this, and it's largely imported, come from China today. So we're closing another window, a supply chain vulnerability with this project. But this is just gives you a sense of the broader range of this. Um, um, and Bechtel Corporation, I mentioned briefly, they're getting a $25 billion contract to build energy a transmission and power plant capabilities in the United States. That's an additional contract. So again, hundreds of thousands of upskilled, high wage jobs, the kind of jobs in which a single paycheck can support a family, a growing family. All right, so the next slide, please. So look, this is a transformation of the U.S. physical economy. These are inputs into driving a transformation of the U.S. economy. This isn't the whole 9 yards. We're going to have to do it. This is going to be this is tens of trillions of dollars investment, over the second Trump administration and into the following 8 years of what likely will be a J.D. Vance, perhaps J.D. Vance Rubio administration. I don't have a crystal ball, but the point is that this is going to be carried forward and has to be carried forward. This chart may be a little hard for you to read, but this is a pie chart, the best I could find. This is from the 22 Statistical Abstract of the United States. This is activity. This is the employment by industry in the United States. Except for basically what's in the upper left-hand corner of what you're seeing, all the rest of it's services. It's not perfectly divided here, but you get the idea. Information, financial activities, leisure and hospitality, educational services, like woke, professional business services, The dark ones there on the left, the dark burgundy is wholesale and retail trade. The one on the red, a little more important, healthcare and social assistance. But the upper left-hand side of that pie chart is all coming around from manufacturing around through agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting, which is only 2% of the economy. That's all of the workforce that goes into industrial production in the United States. Manufacturing is actually less than 10% now. Has been. We're growing it again. I'm not putting this up for you to despair over. The Bible says despair is turning away from hope, and that's a sin, as J.D. Vance reminded his audience the other day down in Mississippi. It's because we're changing this. We're changing this equation. We're going back to being a producer economy, where even the service sectors are in service of the producers of the productive real economy of the United States. It changes the whole psychology. Um, and this is why we have out the next slide. We have out this half pager, right? Coming from a Promethean pack. The new Republican Party is rising. Main Street, not Wall Street. This is what Trump is about. We're in the process. We got a lot of work to do to educate the base of the Republican Party, the state, local organizations, and so forth. They're not on board with Trump yet. They don't understand what Trump's doing. They don't understand the American system where you can direct the economy, collaborate with the private sector, collaborate with states, and build out what we need as a producer economy, and promoting in the process all of the supply chains, the small and medium-sized producers that make up the backbone of the U.S. economy. They flourish in this process. This is what's in Alexander Hamilton's report on manufacturers. The next slide is the backside of that half pager. And then we have from Promethean Action, we have the Build Baby Build. I don't have it here, but people are getting it and circulating it, and it's going through what we're already accomplishing. And these Asian investments are coming in on top of that. So we're returning to an economy where people can comprehend a sense of self-worth. I want to underscore that. It's a process of remoralization with an emphasis on moral. Young people are asking. They're asking the question: how do I? The assassination of Charlie Kirk obviously was a turning point in this process. No pun intended, but it was a turning point. What do I do? How I must do? I must do things. I must intervene as a moral person in the world. I'm responsible for my actions, for a family or a future family, a wife or a future wife and family. How do I do this effectively? How do I judge these things? This is going back to a nation of producers, of citizenry that think as producers. Now, so finally, I want to go to, very briefly here, where we stand now. You can go to the next slide. Where we stand in terms of building out our energy capacity. We're in the middle of a transformation of the U.S. electrical grid as part of this reindustrialization process in the United States. This is a Promethean task, certainly. It's also a Protean task. Proteus, the old man of the sea in Homer. The shifting winds, tides, storms. It's not so easy. It's not so predictable. But we're building this out. This is my latest. This is my Substack page. That's Brian Lance dot substack.com. And the lead article right now up there is titled "Got Power?" ? It goes through a detailed picture of this. But right now, given what the Trump administration has unleashed, we've got about 140 gigawatts of power that are in the works. They're in the pipeline, shall we say. They're either in advanced planning, they're under construction, they're coming online, but they're in these categories between now and 2030. They're not all coming online in 2030. Only a portion of this, maybe 60 gigawatts, 50, 60, 70 gigawatts of this will be, as currently, as what we're looking at right now, will be online by 2030. But we've got 140 gigawatts that's in the process. Now, 50 or 60 gigawatts of this is behind the meter. It's largely for AI. Behind the meter, meaning it's not on the grid. is being built. It's dedicated to data centers, particularly AI data centers, but also chemical industries have behind the meter energy producing process, and they're going.
Let me ask how much we have now. We're going to add.
We have 1 point. I'm getting to that.
Sorry.
We have yeah, sure. That's a good question, Tony. We have about 1.3 terawatts of electrical capacity in the United States. 1.2, 1.3 terawatts. A terawatt is so that's 1.2 thousand gigawatts. So to round off, say we have 1,000 gigawatts of electrical capacity in the United States right now. 1,000 gigawatts. We have in process right now about 140 gigawatts. That's a huge increase from about, I think the figure is 25 gigawatts of baseload power. I'm talking about, I should have stressed this sooner, but I'll stress it. Baseload power. That's 24/7 power. Coal, natural gas, nuclear, hydroelectric, some cases geothermal, all of that added together. In terms of baseload capacity, we've got 140 gigawatts now in the process, in the pipeline, right? And roughly 60 or 70 gigawatts of that slated to come online by 2030. This is not sufficient. This is what we're building ourselves out of a hole, as President Trump has said himself. And this is not a wild figure. We've got to double and then triple the grid of the United States. You know, between now, say, and 2050, that's 25 years out. That ain't so far. That's one generation, human generation. We've got to double, not for AI. That's part of it now. That's a significant factor. But we've got to do it to build out the U.S. as a manufacturing and industrial superpower. We're going to need about 1,000 gigawatts of power if we're going to double and perhaps triple the manufacturing industrial productive output of the United States, as a ballpark figure. So, and just to underscore this is why President Trump is saying he wants, by executive order, he's declaring this. He wants 300 more gigawatts of nuclear power online by 2050. That's a quadrupling of our nuclear power capacity. 300 gigawatts more. And to drive this process, he's speeding up licensing. Right, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is undergoing a whole shift in terms of how it processes, makes decisions on so forth, authorizes projects for nuclear, but also natural gas and so forth. We've got the work sped up on fast neutron reactors in our national labs, and funds going to small modular reactor programs in the private sector. We've restarted nuclear fuel reprocessing and recycling programs that have been dead since the 1970s. They're not online yet, but we've committed. The president, through executive order, has ordered that we're going to begin recycling the nuclear waste that's been sitting in our nuclear power plants, which can be reused as fuel. At least 95% of it can be reused as fuel. We knew that in the 1970s. There was never a nuclear waste problem. So we're moving ahead with this, recycling, breeder reactors, etc. So I want to emphasize President Trump fully recognizes, the administration recognizes that we've got to have a lot more coming online beyond the what's factored into the 2030 figure I gave. There's also finally the question of net gain. In this period between now and 2030, that's 5 years, roughly 45 gigawatts of power production capacity is being retired. That's already taking into account the reversal of the efforts to shut down U.S. clean coal-powered electrical production. The administration, the Department of Energy, the EPA under Lee Zeldin, have moved to reverse those closures, which were in the process under the former so-called Biden administration. But even taking into account that reversal, plants wear out. They've got to be replaced. And replacing plants, it's good. They've got to be replaced. And often it upgrades their power capacity and efficiency and so forth. But you've got to, the net gain in terms of new capacity is then on the order of 100 gigawatts. That's 100 towards an initial 1,000 gigawatts that we need built out as rapidly as possible. So we're in the process of doing this. We're on our way. We're going to have to move the capital in the United States off the sidelines. We're going to have to move with Duragist policies here at home to create national credit to finance a further expansion. And of course, we're going to have to train up the workforce of the United States, a new workforce, new generations of workers, which is, again, already underway. But we're going to have to upgrade that, as already is being done at the state level with programs in states like Tennessee, Texas, and so forth, with new training programs, including those specifically aimed at nuclear technology workers, both scientists, engineers, but also a skilled workforce, a high-wage workforce. So I think that's what I want to cover here. We can open it to the floor. I hope that gives you a sense of the momentum that the United States has now, the importance that China, Japan, particularly, South Korea, particularly, but also Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, and other countries are playing in this process of investment, of bringing to bear capital, hard capital, into the industrial sectors of the U.S. economy to jumpstart, to lift us up to the beginnings of a new platform in infrastructure and manufacturing, a high-tech, advanced platform in infrastructure and manufacturing. So I hope that's useful. Thank you for your attention.